Good evening, everyone. My research is titled Social Media plus Social Pressure equals Toxic Results. This study explores how social media shapes young men's views of masculinity and how it impacts their mental health. Specifically, it looks at the appeal of influencers like Andrew Tate, who promote harmful ideals of dominance, materialism, and emotional suppression to, to promote toxic masculinity. These messages often resonate with young men aged 18 to 25, which is a group that's already vulnerable for mental health struggles like anxiety and depression. My goal is to understand how and why these influences work on this specific group and to offer insights into creating healthier perspectives on masculinity. My research is guided by two key theories, which are social comparison theory and the communication theory of identity. For social comparison theory helps explain that people evaluate themselves by comparing their lives, achievements, or appearances to others, and how social media intensifies this process because it constantly shows idealized versions of success. For young men especially, seeing these influencers who flaunt health, dominance, and confidence, it can create feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt when they can't meet these unrealistic standards. Communication theory of identity, or CTI, explains how identity is shaped through social interactions. Social media creates communities that often normalize toxic versions of masculinity, which often pressures men to change their behavior, beliefs, and their own personal ideals and views in order to fit in and feel like they belong. This conflict between their true selves and the identities they perform online can lead to many mental health challenges, and enhance any underlying feelings that have already been there. Throughout this research, there was three main impacts that were proven and shown. The first one is that social media normalizes unrealistic standards of masculinity, which we all know, unrealistic standards of life as well. These standards often link self-worth to material success and emotional detachment, and constant comparisons and exposure to this toxic content can harm mental health, leading to anxiety, low self-esteem, and depression. This led me to three key questions that I want you guys to reflect on and answer amongst yourselves. First question being, how do young men justify aligning with or rejecting the toxic ideals promoted by influencers like Andrew Tate? And how do these decisions reflect their struggles with self-worth and belonging? Question two, how does the constant exposure to social media content that promotes toxic masculinity reshape young men's understanding of emotional vulnerability? And what are the long-term impacts on their mental health and personal relationships for the future? Question three, how do social media platforms such as Twitter X enable the spread of toxic ideologies, and in what ways do their features and community dynamics influence young men to engage with or challenge these ideals? For my study, I conducted a qualitative research with 15 men aged 18 to 25 with the mean age of 22 years old. To ensure diversity, participants were selected from different educational backgrounds that included 5 undergraduate students, 5 graduate students, and 5 non-students, and different cultural backgrounds. And out of the participants included 8 white male participants, 5 Hispanic male participants, and 2 Black male participants. The mix of educational and cultural backgrounds provided a variety of perspectives on how social media influences identity and mental health. I gathered these participants through convenience and snowball sampling. For convenience sampling, I reached out to current graduate school classmates of mine at UTSA and former classmates of mine at St. Mary's University that still attend. And for the non-students, I asked some neighbors around my apartment complex to participate. And for snowball sampling, I asked each participant to refer me some of their connections when I thought I was not going to have a good amount for a number of participants to conduct the study. I used two qualitative methods to gather this data, which was focus groups and personal interviews. Focus groups, these were divided by educational level, which was undergraduates, graduates, and non-students, and this allowed for participants to openly share their experiences amongst a group where they felt familiar, where they felt comfortable. The individual interviews, however, offered a deeper, more personal look into how social media impacted their mental health and their personal and a more personal view of their thoughts on masculinity. One participant shared how comparing themselves to influencers often led to cycles of frustration and self-doubt, and how online communities pressure you to hide your emotions to appear stronger, even if you're already somewhat belonging to this community or this group. These methods provided what I needed in order to understand participants' lived experiences of everyone that participated in my study. And of course, I took several steps to ensure this study was ethical and respectful to my participants. Their identities were kept anonymous, using only their first names to be addressed on all documents and in person. Data such as scratch notes, voice recordings, interview responses were securely stored on a password-protected iPad that only unlocks with my face recognition and is stored away in a locker in my office that only I have the password to. Findings were reviewed with participants through a process called member checking in order to ensure fairness of their documented responses and to make sure I reported their responses very accurately. As a researcher, my interest in this topic comes from observing how social media promotes these toxic ideals, while observing how social media promotes these toxic ideals. While I personally disagree with these messages that are being pushed, I work to minimize bias by asking neutral questions and open-ended questions. I encourage participants to share freely without being judged, and beforehand, I reflected on myself and made sure to control any body language or impulsive or subconscious reactions that I might have when it came to any responses or reactions from participants. Key themes that were noted were pressure to perform and identity conflicts. Many participants felt pressure to present an idealized version of themselves online. Um, they associated masculinity with dominance and material success and emotional control, which led to a disconnect between their personal public self and their private online self. Platform amplification, social media platforms through algorithms and engagement-driven features repeatedly exposed participants to similar toxic content, and they felt that they could not get away from it. Some insights that came to light throughout the study were the social media dynamics and how likes and comments reinforce and validate these toxic messages, the emotional impact, which says long-term exposure to these toxic ideals and toxic messages resulted in feelings of inadequacy and disconnection for participants who really couldn't meet these standards and didn't align themselves truly with what they were trying to fulfill. Online groups as well, which frame themselves as a community. Group chats, for example, centered on influencers and their ideals, created a culture of competition and comparison, amplifying existing insecurities. From these findings, we can draw several important implications. The theoretical implications show that these results expand on social comparison theory, CTI, showing how digital environments intensify identity conflicts and mental health struggles amongst young men. Some practical implications include how educators and mental health professionals can use these findings to create programs that teach critical thinking about online content that promotes healthier ideas about masculinity and creating more inclusive environments, especially in masculinity. Further research could also lead to social media platforms exploring ways to limit the spread of harmful narratives, perhaps by adjusting algorithm settings and providing insights on how not to be consumed by toxic ideologies. However, further research is needed to investigate how cultural, life, and educational differences specifically affect young men's experiences with toxic masculinity online and their social media use, as well as the impacts on their mental health. In conclusion, social media is a profound impact on young men and their identities and their mental health. And while it offers many opportunities for connection and inspiration, it also promotes very harmful and toxic pressures that can lead to identity conflicts, mental health challenges, and many more things that can cause these young men to suffer internally. And by understanding these dynamics, we can create interventions to support healthier, more authentic views of masculinity and help these young men succeed in achieving a positive self-identity and self-worth. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions and all your feedback.